We light our chalice flame today, as chalice flames are lit in our brother and sister congregations across the world. And as we light this flame, we will hear words from Dr. Eric A. Heller-Wagner. Blessed is the fire that burns deep in the soul. It is the flame of the human spirit, touched into being by the mystery of life. It is the fire of reason, the fire of compassion, the fire of community, the fire of justice, the fire of faith. It is the fire of love burning deep in the human heart, the divine glow in every life. Welcome. Welcome to this, the Sevenoaks Unitarian Meeting House, place for our service this morning. Our service today is called the Holy Disguised. It's a phrase that comes from a poem by M Olsen, which we'll be hearing as a reading a little later on. The thought of the Holy Disguised is wondering where the divinity is in the world, where the sacred is, where the holy is. It's a conundrum. At this time of coronavirus, of pretty awful things that are happening out there, we wonder somewhat, amongst the tumult and the noise, where is the sacred? Where is the holy? How can I recognize it amongst all this chaos? So we'll think a little bit about that today. This is an hour out of your week to stop, to reflect, to connect. This time, this space is yours. I bid you a very warm welcome. Our first hymn is Divinity is Round Us. A reminder perhaps that we are part of the all that is, as is everything else around us too. We are all part of the sacred and the holy in the universe. Divinity is round us. The words will be on your screens.
Divinity Our first reading is from Carla Grosch-Millar from her book Psalms Redux. It is a book of rewritten psalms, renewed, refreshed. We heard Psalm 62 a few weeks back, and today we hear Psalm 65, Redux. Listen. There is a call to worship in the hidden sinews of our being, a taut string waiting to be plucked, a melody longing to be sung. We are made for praise. An abundant earth calls it forth, pounding sea and babbling brook, sighing trees and their singing residents. Shimmering stars and silent night, the growing and the greening, and the restless seed invite a joyful song. A heart freed sings praise. Surprise of mercy and resonant flesh, delight tickled, joy unleashed, tender touch and shared walk. We shout and sing together for joy. Carla Grosch-Millar, Psalm 65, Redux.
Let us come together in a time of prayer and of stillness. Spirit of life all around us, you have gathered us together in a swirl of healing wind. Take this newfound apprehension, an unwelcome shawl heavy upon our shoulders, and make of it a comforter, soft and warm and trusting, in which we might rest our weary souls. Each day we awaken, may our first thought and vision be the peace in the eyes of our sisters, brothers, cousins, who also see the peace in mine. And from this gaze into each other, may the peace of our hearts heal one another. Eternal Spirit, Mother, Father, ever present if only we have eyes to see, we stand in awe of the presence of the universe. In its proper time, may the mystery unfurl before us. Though fettered by our material desires, may the depths of the Spirit uphold and guide us. May the great gifts of the earth sustain us. May the universe forgive our faults and our follies, and may we in equal measure be forgiving. May we ever turn our eyes toward the light, to dispel the darkness which would engulf us. We give thanks for the bounty of the universe, which abounds with power and glory beyond our greatest imaginings. If you wish to, I welcome you to join with me in the last prayer, following the words on your screens. Eternal Spirit, we meet together that our lives may be transformed. May our misdeeds be washed from us, and may we be cleansed of our wayward deeds and thoughts. Each of us knows in our hearts we are not perfect. We have let ourselves down and we seek to make amends. May we have truth in our inner souls, and may we recognize the joys of living lives in love. May we seek the presence of the divine to restore us. Heal us, O Spirit. Make us anew. Amen. Our second reading today is by M Olsen from the Unitarian Universalist Meditation Anthology, Falling into the Sky. And this is a piece called Materializing. In what form did the Spirit appear to you today? The blossom of a flower, the tug of a child's hand, the silent twinkling stars. An old woman smiling at the bus stop, a lover's gentle hug. A presence so close to your soul you could almost touch it. Words of truth formed unbidden in your mind. The holy disguised in so many ways. May your senses open wide in recognition. The words of M Olsen. Our second hymn, building on those words of Olsen, of the materialization of the divine before us, unbidden. Peter Sampson's hymn, Grant us, God, a mind to know you. To the French tune Picardy. The words will be on your screens.
Let
We've been in lockdown of one form or another for nearly 11 months now. Not far off a year, really. And in that time, I've recorded a lot of these YouTube services, mostly from the meeting house here in Sevenoaks, but occasional trips elsewhere. We've had a bit of Dover, a little bit of Tenterton and some Maidstone too, but almost entirely here in Sevenoaks. But those videos have not been just inside the meeting house. To try and build a little variety, there have been some live, still life shots outside too. Filmed from a standing point, perhaps 5 minutes from out in the churchyard. This very beautiful patch of green outside the door of this wonderful meeting house. And over the last 12 months, the variety has been astonishing. You may remember a long time ago now, our second service on here was a spring service, and we started with daffodils as the leaves on the trees began to return, but a swathe of yellow out there. And we've watched the flora as the waves of plants and flowers have grown and changed and died back and started once more. And so over the last year or so, we've had daffodils through bluebells, through lush green grass. And we have the autumnal blackberries, the holly tree, the golden wonder of the leaf fall. And for a couple of months now, we've had the bare-branched wonders as life hibernates. And now, this week, an explosion of snowdrops has begun to spring forth once more. We are nearly full circle. There's even a daffodil just starting to poke its way through out there. But it's not just the flora. The fauna has been beautiful to watch too. The birds. We've had crows and robins and blue tits and magpies. There's a jay that comes through that I've never managed to catch on camera. The family of foxes that shared our summer space in the summer. And squirrels throughout the autumn. Yet again, never managed to film them, and they jeered me on every time I set the camera to record them, only to run away as soon as the tripod was set. And as I set up to film outside this week, on that rather beautiful Friday we've just had, I found myself reflecting on all those different films. It just came across me. It was beautiful sunlight, bright blue sky. And there was a connection and a memory and a realization of what we've been watching. The snapshots of life continuing here in this still, small patch of green. It has been the case that in the large part, the panic, the concern, the uncertainty and restrictions that have taken over the human world have had little effect here. The only real difference has been a stumbling minister and his camera and tripod roaming around a couple of times every week. Life has otherwise continued, untroubled, responding only to the turning of the wheel of the year. And it has been beautiful to watch. Now there is a call that can be heard when standing, absorbed in nature. The birds sing, the branches seem to whisper to one another. Yet there is a deeper voice to be heard too. To stand in nature, in the churchyard here or in many other places, to stand and realise that you are in part of a much bigger, unstoppable sense of life. It's humbling. The awesome nature of where you are, what you can see and hear, and what you can sense. And the utter ordered chaos that nature presents is a link to the all that is, a founding connection to the divine, a realization, or as M Olsen put it, a materialization of that which many might call God. Now, I'm not, of course, the first to notice this, and I will not be the last. Many of you, perhaps all of you, will have had these moments too of unexplainable realization of something. Not necessarily supernatural, but that depends on how you frame it. But it's an almost indescribable link to something greater. Now, this is, of course, the core script for many faith traditions. There is a wonderful story in the Jewish scriptures, in the first book of Kings. And it's one of many stories from Hebrew scriptures and Jewish tradition about a prophet, Elijah. Now, Elijah believed there was one single God. It's very Unitarian, but the Jewish faith, a single God. When many others believed there were a number of different gods, one stronger or more powerful than another. And one of the popular gods at this time was a god called Baal. And Elijah challenged the followers of Baal to a contest to prove whether his god or their god had more power. And Elijah won. And when the queen Jezebel found out, she was really angry. She was furious at Elijah, and he fled into the wilderness to escape. Now, I'm not going to recount the whole story here, but as you might expect, Elijah is scared and confused. And as often happens in these stories, a messenger from God, an angel, helps him through his escape. And after many adventures and hidings and food and things, when he's at his most down moment on this escape, he's in a cave on Mount Horeb, and he's hiding from people. He's hiding from Jezebel. He's absolutely terrified and unsure what on earth he will do next. And a voice speaks to him in the darkness of the cave and tells him to go outside and listen for God. So he goes outside, and Elijah stood there, a great strong wind whipping around the mountains, breaking off bits of rock all around that come crashing down. And he doesn't hear the voice of God. And an earthquake shakes the mountain, and he still doesn't hear the word of God. And then a fire, and God's not in there either. And then after the fire, it's all quiet. And then, in the calm, Elijah heard what's described as a still, small voice. In the quiet, he hears the still, small voice. Now, this story of Elijah in the cave draws our minds perhaps to the surprising nature of the voice of the divine. The writers draw on that contradiction that is presented in attempting to listen to the voice of God. Elijah's story is in the Hebrew Bible, and the God of the Hebrew Bible is often portrayed as an all-powerful figure, a mighty warrior God. Yet here we have a God who does not compete with a great wind or a storm or an earthquake. Only when Elijah turns away from these great dramatic things does he hear the voice of his God, the still, small voice. And the message of the story is perhaps that the voice is always there, if only you could find time and presence of mind to listen. Now, this is a vision that's known not only through Jewish scriptures, but also through its adoption by Christian teachers, and it goes far wider than that too. It's a connectedness that is found through stopping, a connectedness found through stillness. John O'Donoghue, the 20th century Irish priest and poet, he knew about this, and he spoke of silence as the sister of the divine. The two come together. And much earlier than that, Meister Eckhart, 13th century German theologian, reflected that There is nothing in the world that resembles God so much as silence. Silence is the great friend of the soul. It unveils the riches of solitude. But this is still Judaism and then through to Christianity, but Zen Buddhism and other forms of Buddhism talk of the great nothingness in which we all sit. And yet even there is a sacredness and a connection, a common form and destination, a place and a something that is both connected to us and in which we are all ultimately situated. Now, this appearance of the all that is through the natural world brings joy and relief to Elijah in the story we heard earlier. And in our first reading today, the Redux version, the revised and refreshed version of Psalm 65, Carla Grosch-Millar also sings the praise of God, the call to worship that the stillness or the presence of nature can provide. The psalmist writes of the way in which an abundant earth, a babbling brook, sighing trees and singing birds invite a joyful song. The song of praise is, of course, an invitation to the divine for both thanks and praise and worship. Again, it's this still small voice in the ordinary, the realization of the divine in the awesome natural world around us. We are each facing our own God, listening for our own God in the imperfect silence of nature. And when we're absorbed by the holy around us, as we accept the sacred nature of the world and the unimaginable vastness of it all, we too sometimes find a voice deep within ourselves, the essence of the divine within our very being. The voice, the essence of the divine within us. That's where I find this still, small voice. But this too is, of course, not an original thought either, although it's one that starts to see some division in the way God, or this awesome divinity, might be perceived. For some, God will always be perceived as entirely separate. For me, personally, that misses the wonderful realization that each of us contains a part and all of the divine. Now, in that wonderful second reading today, Jean M. Olsen's piece spoke of this realization, of, as she titled it, this materializing. In what form did the Spirit appear to you today? The blossom of a flower, the tug of a child's hand, the twinkling of the stars, and on, and a presence so close to your soul you could almost touch it. Words of truth formed unbidden in your mind. And that's it. For me, that provides the link that so beautifully articulates this recognition of sensing the divine in the natural world and in innocence. And recognizing this must mean the divine is within us too, forming these words of truth within our souls, those still, small words, if only we are willing to listen. Now, when in nature, in the churchyard perhaps, but any place where you can truly feel yourself becoming part of a tiny part of this awesome universe in which we are all, that's when the divine might be felt. Yet it's a feeling of transcendence, of a divine around and within. For Elijah, it was the calm he needed at a time of great stress. For the psalmist, it was the reminder they needed God, is sensed in the world at all times. It is, as Jean M. Olsen puts it, the divine materialized around us. The cycle of the year, the almost forced requirement for me to stand in nature each week and deliberately notice the changing seasons and their effect, has brought for me a true connection to the divine in nature and within myself. Even the pandemic is but a tiny moment in the awesome wonder that the universe provides. And it's within this universe that we find our connections. It's in these small spaces of stillness that we might hear the still, small voices we need to hear. Amidst the chaos lies the beauty and the holy disguised. We turn now to a time of stillness and quiet. As we settle our bodies, perhaps closing our eyes, I shall speak some words. I shall strike the singing bowl. We shall come together in stillness and quiet together. As we settle our bodies, closing our eyes. I shall repeat some words from our second reading today as we enter into stillness together. In what form might the Spirit appear to you today? The holy disguised in so many ways. May your senses open wide in recognition. Some closing words. Let us depart in the spirit of love, never knowing when or where we may find the divine, yet conscious of the spark within each of us and the unfolding beauty that surrounds us. Let us depart in peace. Let us depart in love. May our lives be a blessing. Amen.